Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call our meeting to order. Today is March 12th, 2019. This is a business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. One thing I do want to mention is we do have a sign up for citizens' comments if you'd like to speak. If you could just sign up there. If you don't, or someone comes in late, you can still talk. It's just easier for us to keep track of if you sign up ahead of time. First item on our agenda, if we could please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. First, we need to move the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Glasbaugh?
Here.
Mrs. Hildebrand? Here. Mrs. Hoskins? Here. Mr. Jones? Mr. Bob Jones?
Here.
Mr. Tony Jones? Here. Mrs. Shaw? Student representatives?
Thank you. And if you could call the calendars.
Wednesday, March 13th, 2019 is a professional day for staff, no school for students. Tuesday, March 26th, there is a school committee business meeting.
Thank you. And Dr. O'Shea, any presentations or recognitions?
Yes, a few recognitions tonight, and then I will get into the presentation. The first I'd like to do is ask Dr. Humbert to talk about the retirees that we have on our agenda this evening.
I would like to acknowledge the following retirees who have asked seeking school committee approval for their retirement: Mary McLaughlin, Laurie Dangerman, Cindy Norman for October of next year, Mary Novosad, Jane Lazinski, Marilyn Huntsman, and Judy Wooler. These teachers and school nurse educators have put in an extensive amount of years in their profession, and we are very grateful for everything they have done for the district, for our students.
Indeed. We also have tonight, we do this from time to time. It's the end of the winter season for sports, so once again, the North Kingstown School Department and the high school in particular have had one heck of a season. And I'm just going to give a quick listing of the kinds of accolades our students have earned. Our competition cheer team won the East Coast Classic held at Providence Convention Center 2 weeks ago. Girls gymnastics placed 2 girls in the regionals, including sophomore Lillian Tebow, and finished 4th overall in the state. The high school wrestling team placed 6 wrestlers at the Rhode Island State Championship, the most in school history. The girls swim team won the Bayview Invitational and placed 2nd in the state meet behind 5-time defending champion Barrington. Boys and girls indoor track and field had 18 athletes qualify for the New England Championships held at the Reggie Lewis Center in Boston, including Riley Lalonde, who was the boys' high school jump, the high jump state champion. Finally, our boys basketball team defeated Hendricken to capture the Division I state championship, the first ever in our school's history. The team qualified for the state open tournament as the number 2 seed and has advanced to the Final Four, being held this weekend at the Ryan Center. So get your tickets now. North Kingstown plays Cranston East in the semifinals on Saturday night at 6, and if they win, they will play in the Open State Championship on Sunday afternoon. The time of that game has not been determined yet. So it's kind of an NCAA feel to it, even though they have won the Division I championship, which was a huge accomplishment. There is still a state tournament attached to this. And we also want to thank and congratulate Coach Aaron Thomas. He recorded his 400th career victory against Cranston East in the semifinals, and he has a very good chance of winning the state tournament and Division I champion. So congratulations to everybody on that list. It is certainly well deserved. So also tonight, one more presentation, a very special one. If I could get that picture up on the screen tonight. There it is. So that is, and they're all sitting right here in front of you, everybody, that is our own robotics team. I'm not even sure what level of champion you are, but you guys are champions, I know that. They're the Go NK squad, or the GONK squad, and they have won an impressive competition in the state of Vermont, and now they have an opportunity to participate for the World Championships in Detroit, correct? And so there is an agenda item for approval of that tonight. Coach Powell, could you come to the mic and maybe introduce the players and talk a little bit about that experience?
Good evening. My name is Rick Powell. I am the Science Department Chairperson and the Engineering Curriculum Coordinator here at the high school. I'm also the robotics coach for the after-school program. What you have in front of you right here are just representation of one of our teams. We are the largest after-school program in the state with about 50 students on 5 teams, which includes both the high school and Whitford Middle School this year. We have members of the team, which are juniors and seniors. We got Nathan Rome, Tom Richworth, Yu Hong Sui, Jake Labuti, Sam Much Wilson, and Kazan Gallman. And by going up to this competition up in Vermont, they were given the award of, the Inspire Award, which basically just says that this team on and off the field, from their preparations from September until now, was the best team at this competition. So this goes on Robot Play, which is a game that they play on a 12-foot by 12-foot field. Their engineering notebooks, their presentations, their design. They were the first team in the state of Rhode Island to win an award out of the state in the 13-year competition of this year history of this competition. So it's a huge recognition, and it's the first time that we will be attending the World Championship.
Congratulations.
That is with your approval.
And with that segue, if I could ask the committee for unanimous consent to move that agenda item up for consideration at this time, which is item H, which is the school committee approval of the robotics club attendance of the out-of-state championship. Under our policy, any out-of-state events need to come before us. Do we have unanimous consent on that? No objections. So if I could have a motion to approve item H. Anyone? Sorry, he said, yeah, but we didn't have a motion. So, Mr. Jones, was that a motion to approve item H? Okay, motion to approve item H. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. Ms. Hildebrand? Okay. And so any discussion on that? First of all, I just want to congratulate you guys on your excellent work. I know that doesn't happen without a whole lot of hard work that goes into it from each and every one of you, as well as your coaches and anyone who's volunteering and helping with your teams as well. So congratulations. Any other comments?
Just quickly, guys, I'm sure you know that AI is going to replace about 50% of the jobs in the future, so you guys are really setting yourselves up. I have no doubt there'll be a time in the future where you'll say, I was kind of the first to do this, and now everybody else is following behind me, so congratulations on being pioneers in this area.
Anyone else? Okay, then we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, you're off to your tournament. Good luck.
On behalf of all the members, thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Auger for his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blasball. Am I on here? Yeah, okay. So thanks, everyone, for coming again this evening. I'm going to give a brief history of this topic at school committee meetings, and so just so you know how things will proceed tonight, I will try to explain to you where we are, what kinds of proposals we have in front of us tonight. I know our timeline is that the school committee would take a vote on this item, not tonight, but at our next meeting, just to give everyone a chance to, say their piece. Talk with myself or talk with any members of the school committee about your opinions on this matter, and then they would take up the topic again in 2 weeks and try to, put that topic to bed at that point. So early on, my initial presentation, we had one proposal on the table, and that proposal moved about 17 students from Forest Park to Stony Lane, and then about 39 students from Stony Lane to Hamilton. And those 39 students, I know this is a little bit difficult to see tonight, so we're in this area down here, Shermantown Road and roads off of that. And, you know, we looked at how that would create some space at Forest Park. It would also create a little bit more space at Stony Lane. Those two schools very much need that. And one school in particular, Hamilton, is very low compared to the capacity. I've explained this at the first meeting, but I want to explain it again tonight. When I say capacity, it means something different in two different contexts. One context is sometimes at the beginning, like in August, when we're looking at how many teachers do I need at a particular school, and I have, you know, so many kids in grade 3, and the capacity for that class may be, say, 24 or 26 kids. That's not what we're talking about here. The capacity I'm referring to is a number that's set by architects, by the Department of Education, and by the fire department, and that basically, by law, tells us thou shalt not have more than this number of students in your school, period. So you can't, even if you want to, allow for the next student to come in on, you know, at least on a regular basis for regular schooling. So we have to obey that. And for the first time since I've been superintendent, which is now 8 years, it's been 9 years since we've done any redistricting. No elementary student in our district has ever been redistricted. So for the first time in 9 years, we have an issue where Forest Park in particular will go over capacity next year. We predict that may or may not happen. We're looking at approximately 102%, so that's not too many kids over, but it could happen. So we need to be prepared for that. We also notice that we're projecting at Stony Lane to be at 94%, and which is livable. We can do that, but the preference would be for most of our schools, if I could, you know, redistrict, you know, the whole thing all together and get everybody to around 80 to 85%. That's your best zone for, you know, the capacity number at your schools, because then if you have a year like what happened at Forest Park and at Stony Lane last year, we had a lot of unexpected kindergartners come in just over the summer before we opened, and about 20 more than was expected at each school. And when you have capacity in your building, you can absorb something like that. You never know for sure how people are going to move into the district and move out and what age their children are going to be. So you really need to be careful about, you know, making sure you have space in the schools to absorb them no matter where they move. And, you know, right now we're at a place, particularly at Forest Park, more so than anywhere else, where that could be an issue. So the proposal at that, for that, and this was back on the 5th of February, so about a month ago, was that, you know, those two moves would take place. That would put Forest Park down to about 92%. It would move Hamilton from what is now 65% capacity. That's very low. There's a lot of room in that school. We predict we could absorb another 150 students just in Hamilton alone. And this just has to do with the demographics of the town, where people are moving in and where they're moving out, and what age are their children at the current time. So there's a lot more room in Hamilton than any other school. So, so this would bring Hamilton to about 85%, and Stony Lane would go to 92%. Still not in that, you know, 80s zone that we would like, but I think, you know, as people have indicated to us, the people who have kids at Stony Lane like them at Stony Lane, and they like to stay there. And so 92 can work. Probably won't mean another redistricting for at least a few years. We'll keep an eye on it, but you know, for now, that can work. And so that was my proposal, trying to affect as few students as we possibly could. So in a district of about 4,000 students, this was about 56 kids altogether that would be redistricted. And that provision included, this proposal included an item having to do with grandfathering in. And that proposal had to do with fifth graders being able to, if they're moving out of, whether it's Forest Park or Stony Lane for this move, that they could stay if their parents could deliver them to the nearest bus stop. The reason that that was doable was because in both of these cases, the Forest Park neighborhood and the Stony neighborhood, the nearest bus stop was not all that far away, maybe a quarter of a mile still a bus stop that would still be going to that particular school, so we can make it work if the parents were willing to drive them to that bus stop. That's not the best scenario that we want, because as great as parents can be and want to be, sometimes you can't be there at the end of the day when that bus is dropping them off. And if it's in your neighborhood, you know that they can at least kind of walk themselves home. If it's further away from your neighborhood, that becomes a problem. And sometimes, doesn't happen often, but sometimes if the parent is not there to greet a child, the bus would keep the child and drop them back off at the elementary school, and the parent would have to go to the elementary school to pick up the child later that afternoon, which nobody really wants. So we're trying to avoid that as much as possible, too. So at the last meeting that we had, a few ideas came to the forefront by members of the audience and by members of the committee and myself, one of which would be for the Stony move to absorb the neighborhood just north of that here, which includes the Glen, and over here is Railroad Avenue and the offshoot streets from Railroad Avenue. And that would take in roughly another 40 or so students, 40 to 45 students. And the reason for including them in this move, first of all of these neighborhoods here, the dividing line was really, kind of up about here originally when Hamilton was first operating, and for many years after that. Again, it was just a demographic shift in the community where a lot of houses were being built in Hamilton, and we needed room there, and there was less at Stony, so we moved Hamilton families to Stony. That would have probably been about 20, 25 years ago when that was happening. So this is not a foreign concept in North Kingstown that these neighborhoods here would be zoned for Hamilton. So, and that can work. The other nice thing about all of this moving together, these are the neighborhoods right here that go to Wickford Middle School when they become middle schoolers. So some of the parents talked about how they currently go to Stony Lane, and most of their friends from Stony Lane go on to Davisville Middle School, while about 20% of that population goes on to Wickford Middle School. And so not having that kind of break, knowing that all the kids they're going to Hamilton with would then move on to Wickford Middle School as one big unit, is a nice, comforting thought. You're not, breaking relationships with your friends from elementary school. So that was considered, that sounds like a pretty good idea. How would that work? It's a definite pro of that idea, and that's part of the second proposal. That's what's now included in the second proposal. The unfortunate thing about the second proposal is the grandfathering piece. So the other item members of the audience asked for was considering my child has been at the school now, particularly if they get into grade 3, they've been there for 3 years, they've got 3 more to go, can we grandfather into grade 3? And that could work in terms of the numbers. We can make that work. It will be especially tight in the first year at Forest Park, but it's workable. But the busing piece becomes a lot more complicated, and let me explain why. First of all, obviously, the buses that are going, there are 2 buses that go down into this neighborhood right now to get kids for Stony Lane. Those 2 would now be having to go, obviously, to Hamilton, because that division is made even for the K through 3 students. So they're not available for the bus ride. And if you know anything about this topic, we've had a lot of discussion about school start times and that whole sort of thing over the years, and the biggest problem with moving that at all has to do with the amount of buses that we have. About a decade ago, we probably had 6 more buses than we currently have now. Over the years, when you get the tight budget seasons, there are decisions made about, well, can you do with 1 less bus? And you can make it work. A few bus rides are going to be a little bit longer, but you lose flexibility to do kind of these extra runs when you would need them. Right now, both plans include what we're calling a lottery bus that would also go to Hamilton, and part of this, the bus stops are up here in the Quidnesset neighborhood, and one is over here in the neighborhood that's currently zoned for Fishing Cove. And we put them all in areas where transportation is the most difficult. So places like the low-income neighborhoods near Quidnesset, and then there's also a low-income neighborhood behind the police station where the bus stops would be. That would be available to any student who wanted to get on that bus and go to Hamilton, regardless of whatever neighborhood they're coming from. But because it's such a long ride already, we'd want to make it as much of an express as we can. So it's only about 3 or 4 spots. One of them is at Quidnesset Elementary. There are 2 neighborhoods in the Quid Forest Park area, and then right on down to that, right behind the police station, and express right down to Hamilton. And that keeps the ride doable. And that's to also respond to requests that we've had over time, over the last, many years I've been superintendent, a bunch of times, from parents to say, is there another option that isn't, a transfer that's a year-by-year thing, and I'm not sure if it's going to last. Trying to spread the low-income population around the district so it's not so concentrated just at Quidnesset, but also give, no matter what parent, high income, low income, any income, an opportunity to say, you know what, I think I would prefer a choice, and there's room right now at Hamilton, so if we provide that bus, can that work? And this is an experiment. It may be a very popular thing and we fill up a bus. It may be something where just a few parents decide they want to do that. You can understand when a parent would want to say, I'd like my elementary school to be nearby. That makes a lot of sense. And in this case, that would not be the case. So it's kind of an experiment. It's trying to be creative and come up with an answer to a problem that many have presented to us over the years. So the issue with busing, some of you have called me and talked to me about that issue, and I had to actually send out an amended version, if you notice in the emails that I sent. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep it as simple as I could, option 1, option 2. But after I sent out option 2, I realized a problem existed, and I talked about this with my transportation supervisor. So as I mentioned in option 1, it has an option for grandfathering of grade 5 students. Now, if you take the number just in this neighborhood here of 39, and only grade 5 is grandfathered, you're probably talking about 6 or 7 kids. And they would have, a relatively short, quarter-mile walk at most. And in a lot of cases, parents would just, drive up the street and park at the bus stop, and they could make it work. In the case of going to both of these neighborhoods now, and offering a grades 3, 4, and 5 grandfathering. And that's what's been requested. So I put these numbers in here. So what happens now is you have roughly 85 students in this mix, and if you're just cutting it down the middle, there's a potential that half of those students would want to be grandfathered in and want to be on another bus. Now, right when you do this, because over here there's a lot of open territory, it's not housing, there isn't a nearby bus stop. The nearby bus stop is probably closer to a mile away now. And you're talking about a potential of 40 students to get on at that nearest bus stop, which makes it very difficult. We're not sure that there would be 40 seats on that bus. Obviously, there's another full bus that's going to an elementary school at that time. And again, it exacerbates that problem of, particularly at the end of the day, if there's a parent not there to pick up the child, now the child is a good mile away from home, and that doesn't make us feel good. So we're reluctant to do that, to provide transportation. The grandfathering of 3 grades will work for us in terms of the numbers going to each school and making sure we stay below cap. But the transportation piece is not something under the current conditions we accommodate unless we take away the lottery bus. And that's a decision for the school committee to make. And I know people have different opinions about that. Again, it's an experimental item. I think it has some value, and it tries to address a need that we're looking at. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen, at least not next year, if at all. So, that's up in the air too. So when you look at the two proposals, they have some pros and cons, right? The first one affects fewer students. The second one grandfathers deeper into grade 3, which people like. It keeps all the neighborhood kids going from this area to Hamilton and then Wickford together as a unit, which is people see as a nice thing. The second, but that option also includes a problem with the busing and maybe a need to do without the lottery bus to make it work. So like I said, there's pros and cons. So the way the meeting is going to work from here is we're going to go to citizens' comments, and people have a chance to, express your opinion on all of this. And we're not allowed in citizens' comments to answer questions, but I put this back on the agenda right after citizens' comments under the superintendent's report, so that I'm going to be, taking some notes on your questions, and I will come back to this and address any questions people may have or any comments you may have, and open it up to the school committee as well right after citizens' comments. So that works, Mr. Blasball?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. O'Shea. So next item on the agenda are citizens' comments. So let me just grab the list here. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we do have a list. If you did not sign up, it does not mean you can't speak, though. Once we go through the people on the list, I'll give anyone who wants to speak an opportunity to do so. We do ask that each person for citizens' comments, please limit your comments to 3 minutes so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. I have a little light here. It just sort of goes green, yellow, red, just so you have an idea of how long you've been. And so if it starts to get to the red and flash, we ask that you please wrap up your comments so that we have time for everyone, please. First person who signed up is Tammy Ward. If you could please, when you come to the microphone, speak your name and your address, just so that we have it for our clerk so she can keep track of who everyone is.
My name is Tammy Ward. My address is 86 Logan Street in Warwick. I'm here this evening because I wanted to take the opportunity to express my confusion to an injustice that occurred when I was terminated on February 19th from my position of BMA at Davisville Academy. I had no prior knowledge of any verbal or written warnings, no conversations about me not performing my job efficiently, or that my job was in jeopardy. I even applied for a 6.5 position in December and was granted that on January 28th. I recently acquired a copy of my personnel file, which contained no negative remarks or reports, and the file confirmed what I had already known, that I was an efficient and capable employee at this school. In fact, the evaluation given to me on December 5th was of exemplary caliber. Despite all this, I was called into the office on February 19th with my school principal, the director of HR, and my union president, and I was told that I was no longer a fit for my position and was to turn in my badge and leave the school for the day, well, for good. I was told because I was in my probationary period, which was just shy of the end of 2 weeks of my original position, which I had been there for 5.5 months, that I was not granted any more than that for an explanation. I was not job searching when I took this job. I left a very stable job position to come here to North Kingstown. Now, without any real explanation, I have found myself unemployed with a very confused husband, 2 children, one of which is disabled and one in college. As you can imagine, the jobs at Davisville Academy are hard to fill as we serve a very particular population. I performed my duties with the utmost patience, compassion, tolerance, and professionalism. Even after sustaining the injury of a broken nose and a severe concussion, I only took out 8 school days because I was dedicated and supportive to my staff and students. I developed bonds with these kids. I love them, and they are kids who already do not often trust adults. I established morale among staff and built relationships that were collaborative and meaningful, and then one Tuesday it was over. So I'm asking you, what message does this convey to our children? That another adult can abandon them? Against my will and without any knowledge or reasonable explanation, I was discharged and still have not had the language of my termination changed. I have been involved with the special needs community for over 18 years. I am very passionate about the field of mental and emotional health for our children. I am currently halfway through my master's in clinical mental health and counseling. My question to you is this: why was I taken from a job that is already hard to fill, from a school that was already understaffed, granted a new position, and then terminated 2 weeks later. I was a good fit for that school. I belonged there. This whole situation, I feel, was handled very poorly. You did not just affect my life. I have no issues finding another job. But what you did do was take one more passionate and qualified adult from these kids and showed them that once again, adults can abandon them. And that is what truly breaks my heart, as it should yours, because that is where the true injustice lies. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice and corruption will never be transformed by keeping hidden, but only by bringing them out of the light and confronting them with love." I always do what I do with love. I will teach with love, I will advocate with love, and I will counsel, and I will fight with love. So what will you do to make this right? Thank you.
Thank you. The next person on the list is Kent Dresser.
Hi, good evening. Kent Dresser, 371 Glen Hill Drive. With regard to the redistricting, second proposal, option 2, although my wife and I are sympathetic with some of our friends and neighbors that this is an inconvenience for, we think it's important to note that there's actually some families that this works really well for, including mine. I have now a toddler who will be entering the North Kingstown school system. I'm a product of at least Wickford L, and I have a kindergartner at Stony Lane. From what I can see, Stony Lane looks pretty full to me. My son goes to school in what looks like a converted closet, no windows, with a teacher that was brought over from Hamilton anyway. And the school's about 50% further away. So we support that. We appreciate the hard work that the school committee is doing here. We understand it's a tough job, and we hope for a great result. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Tommy Vigil.
Good evening. Tommy Vigil, 2497 Court. This is on the proposal number 2. At the last school committee, and at this one here, it was stated several times that the goal was to disrupt as few students as possible. Based on the numbers given at these meetings, proposal 1 would affect about 56 students. Proposal 2 would affect about 90 students. This is an increase of 60%. Proposal 2 would contradict your goal to affect as few students as possible. It's also stated that Proposal 2 would mean that Hamilton's enrollment could reach 92% capacity, while Stony Lane would be about 82%. If Hamilton does reach this capacity, it's possible that another realignment might be required. At the last school committee meeting, a member did state that they would try to avoid disrupting students that were already affected once in the event of having to realign. Although that's a good gesture, it's not guaranteed, and therefore it's possible that these same students could be affected again within a few years. To summarize, if your goal is to disrupt as few students as possible, the right choice would be the first proposal. The second one, not only would you increase the number of affected students by 60%, but you also increase the chances of another required realignment that could affect these same students in the next few years. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person is Sandy Vigil. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your names, which I probably am.
My name is Sandy Vigil. I live at 249 Sylvan Court. I'm here to express my concerns over the proposed redistricting plan my family is currently being faced with. Presently, I have 2 daughters in grades 1 and 2 at Stony Lane. In addition to my girls, I also have a 2-year-old son who will be enrolled in the school system in 3 years. I fully understand that Forest Park has reached its maximum capacity and is required to take action, and that Stony Lane is at about 90% capacity. I have reviewed both options thoroughly and have had lengthy discussions with my neighbors, my husband, and most importantly, my children. I acknowledge that a change must be made. I agree with what some of the committee members stated at the last meeting. If approved by voters, the school system is looking to embark upon a major reconsolidation of the schools in 4 to 5 years. It is best to keep this adjustment to a minimum, as Dr. Auger stated. Given the two choices, option 1 is by far the better of the two options. The least amount of families will be affected and all of the capacity issues will be addressed. If students from the Glen and Slocum Woods and other surrounding neighborhoods are moved from Stony Lane to Hamilton, along with the lottery-based bus system comprised of students from Quidnessa and Fishing Cove, Hamilton will soon be faced with the same situation, reaching 91% capacity in 3 years, just shy of what Stony Lane's current capacity is. If that is the case, Hamilton students may have to deal with the same redistricting scenario again in a few years. Our children may be forced for a second time to say goodbye to teachers and friends that were created at a school they trusted. By voting for option 2, we will be shifting this capacity issue from one school to another school. Implementing a lottery-based bus system for the students of Quidnessa and Fishing Cove would lead to larger class sizes at Hamilton, perhaps, and to its already increased capacity. Would it be possible to remove the suggestions from options 1 and 2 at the moment, as it is addressing a different issue, the demographics versus a capacity issue? Those schools are not at capacity and should not be involved in this vote until the numbers of students actually attending Hamilton are a bit more finalized. Once the student committee, the school committee and Dr. Auger have a clearer picture of enrollment at Hamilton, the lottery for those schools could then be opened up, provided there is enough space. Currently, Stony Lane has some students enrolled who reside outside of Stony Lane District. If our children are being asked to leave Stony Lane to attend Hamilton, will these out-of-area students be asked to return to their home schools as well? I believe that once a school reaches a capacity of 90%, these students should return to their designated school zone. This should be mandatory and consistent across the district. Perhaps that would allow for more students to remain at Stony Lane. Providing an opportunity for only grades 2 to 4 to be grandfathered in is an unacceptable choice for families that also have children in K or 1. As a parent, I am now forced to make the difficult decision of whether to keep my second grader with the teachers and friends she loves at Stony Lane or move her to a new school while my first grader has no choice and must now be separated from her teacher's friends and now sister. In addition to this, if students are allowed to be grandfathered in and parents are required to provide transportation, the parking situation at Stony Lane and Hamilton would need immediate attention. Currently, they both lack sufficient parking spaces and can become very congested and dangerous. This would most likely require additional funding. It is my understanding that the families who proposed option 2 were trying to ease this difficult transition and were hopeful that if multiple families were included and neighborhoods were included, it wouldn't be as hard on the students being transferred. Some families have also expressed interest in keeping these students together so they can attend the same middle school. This has never been a concern of ours, nor has it been for any of the former Stony Lane students we have spoken to. In fact, these students will now have the opportunity to create more friendships and reunite with old friends once they attend high school. If Hamilton has space available, perhaps these families that are interested in attending Hamilton could have the option to do so. I'm wrapping up.
Yeah, thanks.
I know my time is up. I'm sorry.
I hate interrupting people.
I know. I'm sorry. See, the light is off. So we built our home in this neighborhood for a reason. We love the location, and more importantly, we love the school. We know the children need a stable and trustworthy environment, and that's why we never planned on moving while our kids were enrolled here. As a parent, it is heartbreaking that our children could potentially be faced with leaving teachers they love and trust and friends they adore. There is no need to disrupt almost 90 additional children by voting for option 2. We would love for all children to remain where they are enrolled. However, if a change needs to be made, option 1 is the best choice for the children. The least amount of students will be affected and all the capacity issues will be addressed. In closing, I'd like to thank you for all the time and effort you put into our children's education. Your decision on March 26th will be affecting many families. I'm hopeful you'll vote for option 1 so that many children will be able to remain at Stony Lane, a school they have grown to love and trust. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person is Tony Lizzie.
Hi, I'm Tony Lizzie. I live at 75 Brigade Drive in Slocum Woods. I have 3 children at Stony Lane, 4th grader, 2nd grader, and a kindergartner. I would imagine my family is one of the most affected families in this proposal. First, I just want to say that I appreciate the work you guys have to do. I know that it's not easy, and I know at the end of the day you all want to do the right thing. I also appreciate the time that you've spent with me on this issue. I've been able to meet with Dr. Auger, Greg, and Lisa, and so I appreciate the time you've taken to help us get a better understanding and talk about some of these issues. I do have some concerns with Proposal 2. Those concerns are first and foremost the disruption to my family and families in the neighborhood that have to split their children between schools. Under Proposal 2, if I want to let my 5th grader finish out Stony Lane, I have to send my kindergartner to a different school. Not only is that just an issue with having 2 different schools, but not, the transportation issues that it causes. So do I transport some of my kids back and forth each day and my wife transport them somewhere else? We can't be in 2 places at once. That's a hardship on our family. Second, our children are rooted in Stony Lane. They've developed relationships there with the teachers and the kids. My kindergartner has an IEP, and he's thriving right now with the team around him. The argument was made last meeting that it would be harder for an older child to change schools than a younger. I can tell you that that would not be the case as it relates to my family. Third, I understand that Hamilton is a good school. I'm not, however, convinced that adding 80 students, let alone 50 students to Hamilton, will be a seamless transition. I'd imagine that student-teacher ratios would have to stay within guidelines, but how would the additional stress of 80 students on the school impact the education as well as the environment? I'm curious as to what case studies or analysis that the board did prior to adding on this proposal. All the statistics about how good Hamilton are is based on, Hamilton is based on the numbers they have today. Will it be the same when you add 80 students? The effect is unknown. Not to mention, in addition to that, the parking issue and the lack of the light at Hamilton, that is a safety issue that I'm concerned with. So lastly, we don't know where numbers are going to be in the future, and they certainly could shift, thus potentially causing a need for another change. So I ask, why choose option 2 if it's not 100% necessary? So I would like to propose option 1 with a couple of adjustments. If you did option 1, grandfathered grades 3 through 5, and allowed families from the Glen or Slocum Woods, if they wish to send their kids to Hamilton, if they feel that's in their best interest, then allow them to send their kids to Hamilton with their own transportation. From my understanding, this is possible, and it does achieve the board's objective and superintendent's recommendation. Option 2 clearly causes the most disruption to families. It also doesn't actually fully integrate middle schools, as mentioned. If option 1 wasn't satisfactory, it wouldn't have been originally proposed. So I'm asking for your consideration to not unnecessarily disrupt families and just consider a smaller change before a bigger one. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, sorry, I can't read the first name. Is it Alec Reuter? Sorry. As someone
Can I borrow that pointer that you had? Is that available? Seriously?
Yeah. As long as you don't point it at anybody.
Right.
There you go. So it's this green button right in the middle there. Okay.
So Mr. Lizzie is my neighbor.
If you could state your name and
sure.
address, sir.
It's Nick Reuter, 49 Brigade Drive. So option 1 came across. We understood what it was. It didn't affect us, so certainly we didn't give it too much thought. Option 2 comes along, and I'm not sure what the motivations necessarily were, but there's certainly a quantitative difference between 1 and 2. And I understand your job. Your job is to steward our children through education, which is why we moved here, and I appreciate exactly what it is that you're doing. But just like anything, certainly less sometimes is more. And to affect so many children has some effect. To affect few has an effect, but you can measure it, then make a potential change going forward. So what I would just ask is, because I know this is not a question and answer, is if option 1 answers the immediate concerns, why push for option 2? What exactly is the main motivation? To put this to bed for a number of years, or to somehow redistribute the demographics, which has been talked about? Just like a clearer answer to what the main motivation is. And then what sort of future investigation has been done with the planning boards of the town? Where is the growth happening? So we make this move today, and the superintendent says, now we're all 85%. That's great. Where are we going moving forward? So I'm going to use the pointer here if I can. So here's the Glen. North of this is farmland. North of this is also quarry. Essentially encumbered land that is not to be developed anytime soon. So it's safe to say growth in this area, less the few lots that have not necessarily been recorded, will be limited. This area is full of open space zoned residential. So there's certainly chance for growth here. It's not going to happen at Quonset. We know what's going on here. Reynolds Farm will affect Fishing Cove. So this certainly has the chance of the most development going forward. It's zoned properly. People want to be in this town, just as I did. So I just want to make sure that the future projections of growth were taken into account seriously. Because it's not just a today question, as you guys all know, it's a tomorrow question. And then again, the whole idea about, I hope there's some folks from Hamilton here. I'm just questioning by the size of the crowd. I do real estate development for a living. When I do something, if folks have kids moving into their schools, they're here in droves. They're wondering, don't bring 30, 40 kids. We're adding 80 kids to Hamilton. So has the notice been proper to those citizens? My voice is one. What about the voice of those folks in Hamilton who are now saying, 80 kids from where? Who now? My class is now 15, now it's 20. I had a 10 to 1, now it's 15 to 1. I just want to make sure the notice has been proper. It seems as if it hasn't been, but that's an important issue to certainly address. And then back to the teachers. And my personal story doesn't really matter. I understand that. My son is an individual. The greater good is what's looked for. I understand that completely. Just want to make sure that all of these things have been thought of. And if they're not thought of today, they will be thought of before the vote. And if not, maybe push forward beyond the 26th. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will address those points. Yeah.
right.
I was watching you. All right. Thank you.
Next is Janelle Fotopoulos.
Hello, my name is Janelle Fotopoulos, 432 Sylvan Court. Thank you for taking the time to hear our position on the school redistricting issue. I live in Slocum Woods neighborhood affected by the newly proposed option 2. I have 3 children, oldest a 7th grader at Wickford Middle, and my youngest a 2nd grader at Stony Lane. I understand the need to alleviate the overcapacity issue at Forest Park, and I also understand the need not to redistrict every few years. The initial option proposed by Dr. Auger was offered for a reason. It meets the goal of moving a large enough number of students to increase capacity at Hamilton and would make room for Stony for the students located at nearby Stony that are currently at Forest Park. And it disrupts as few students as possible, yet achieves the goals set forth. Every parent that I've spoken with in Slocum Woods is against option 2, as well as several in the Glen. Yes, Hamilton is a good school, I won't contest that, but it's not about the school itself. It's about disrupting a larger number of students in a school that they have grown to love. Many of the parents in Slocum Woods neighborhood are regular volunteers in the school and active in the PTO, and it's more than just a school to us. Emotion aside, option number 2 would put Hamilton at 91% capacity, higher than ideal that you noted at the last committee meeting, especially with the serious traffic flow and parking issues currently at Hamilton. Stony Lane would only be at 82%. There are still upwards of 50 lots to be built within Slocum Woods. I personally have seen 8 houses built in the last 2 years within eyesight of my property, not to mention the dozen or so throughout the development. This building is not going to slow down, and there will even be more students entering Hamilton in the next few years that could put Hamilton in the same position that we're at currently with Forest Park today. Then we're faced with another potential redistricting. As for the argument with the students when you group the Shermantown students with the Glen and the Slocum Woods to go to Wickford Middle School together, I think that there's a silver lining there to be considered. My son went through Stony Lane K through 5, and upon entering middle school, many of his friends did go to DMS, and initially that was disappointing to him to learn that some of his friends would not be with him at Wickford. However, I think it creates a great opportunity for our children to connect with new friends and faces from other schools. It does mix things up for them and allows them for new experiences and new friendships to form. I don't see the split personally as from Stony families going to different middle schools as a key deciding factor in this decision. I strongly urge you to consider option 1 and impact as few families as possible. If the Glen wants to move with the Shermantown families to Hamilton, they can voice that position and perhaps you grant them that option. But Slocum Woods, in terms of whom I've spoken with, overwhelmingly wants to stay at Stony Lane and votes for option 1. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you. Next is Richard Langfield.
I'm Richard Langfield, 44 Antelope Circle. I have a third grader at Stony Lane currently. And it certainly doesn't matter one way or another, she'll be going to Hamilton next year. Option 1 or 2 is going to impact my family the same. I think the thing that needs to be considered is what is the longevity of option 1. I do think there is a lot of building going on, and we all see it in the area around the Glen and Slocum, but we also don't live in other parts of North Kingstown where there is still a significant amount of building going on. I think redistricting is going to occur again, and I think it would be best to have as big a peer group for these kids to move to Hamilton with as possible, and also prevent multiple redistricting over many years and just kind of get it done at one shot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Pamela Pinheiro.
Pam Pinheiro, 710 Slocum Road. I'm in favor of neither option 1 or option 2. I would like to propose option 3, so you could stop pitting neighbors against neighbors and just move Forest Park students to either Quidnesset or Hamilton Elementary School, which both have room. The bus ride from that area to Hamilton is no longer than the bus ride that any of our children will take to either Hamilton or Stony Lane. Our schools are far either direction. So I know that's been said that it's too far for Forest Park, but I argue that it is not. However, I don't think you will add option 3. So option 1 has no flexibility at all to it. It is my understanding that you cannot grandfather 3rd through 5th in option 1, leaving only 5th graders to be grandfathered in, which is, I am also very vested in the school. My kids are vested in the school. I'm a volunteer at the school. I have a Girl Scout troop that meets after school, so I also am vested. So those are the problems with option 1. Also, I do not believe it will solve the problem, and you will be looking at redistricting again in another couple of years, and then you will grab the larger area then. Option 2 allows for real number changes to allow for growth, especially if you eliminate the lottery bus. If you eliminate the lottery bus, you would solve the transportation issue, allowing 3rd through 5th graders to have transportation by freeing up that bus. We all live very close. It is not far for all of our houses. I do not believe siblings were even considered. I think they should be considered for 3rd through 5th graders, especially if you eliminate the lottery bus. That frees up 30 slots. I also would like to add and request that to both option 1 and option 2, you add a clause that these students who move will not be moved again if you can guarantee the lottery bus, full elementary education at Hamilton for when they sign up for the lottery, then you can grant that to all of our kids for option 1 or 2, that they will not be moved again, that they can complete their elementary school education in the school that they get moved to. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is David Nicolato.
David Nicolato, 10 Sylvan Court, over in the Glen. Before I do my prepared remarks, what a good problem to have. It's when you think about it, my wife works for the United Way. People are worried about having a roof over their head, having, pardon the expression, terrible schools, and we have the option of 2 fantastic schools here. So in terms of, it's a very good problem to have. Now let me get technology going here. 5 months ago, my family relocated to North Kingstown from Texas, specifically the Glen. We chose this area due to the high quality of schools, among other things. As the son of 2 public educators, I was taught, and I firmly believe, that education should be fair and equitable for all. That is why I believe you have no option but to choose option number 2. Option 1 only offers short-term effects on the district, but also by carving out the neighborhood of the Glen, I don't see how option 1 is fair for all. As I mentioned in my first public comment on the subject, the new option 2 helps us achieve longer-term success. None of us want to be back here in 2 years discussing a redistricting option again. We need to ensure that the option you select as part of this process prepares us appropriately for the future. Option 2 allows us for a more streamlined feeder school approach to Wickerford Middle School. And while I don't want to move my kiddo Ian, here's your shout out, to another school who's in 3rd grade right now at Stony, I firmly believe that you have to do what is fair here. So I hope you will consider option 2 over option 1, because I believe education decisions should not be made based on zip code or street or neighborhood or low income or upper income, but what is best for all of our kids. My final ask of you this evening is that as you prepare for this change, whether it be option 1, option 2, option 3, option 1 with the side feeder bus, whatever option it is, I implore that you all put a comprehensive plan in effect to ensure that every affected child has a smooth and comfortable transition. Our kids deserve that. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of the list of people who have signed up to speak, but as I mentioned, anyone who wants to speak, if you haven't signed up, you still can have an opportunity to do so. Yep, if you could just step up to the microphone and please clearly state your name and address so that our clerk can take it down.
Hi, Jake Mather, 135 West Allenton Road. I'm a dad. I've got 2 kids at Hamilton Elementary School, and I want to just talk about that for a second. I'm here to voice a support for option 1 or option 2. And I'm also the PTO president at Hamilton Elementary. I've had conversations with many people, and I think the general consensus, and perhaps the reason why the voice at Hamilton is not here as much as the voice at Stony, is because there is general support for this at Hamilton. Although we're at 60-something% capacity and our hallways are nice and wide and open and we've got plenty of empty classrooms, what it does mean is that we also have maximum capacity in all the classrooms that we do have. My son is in 3rd grade and he's at max capacity. My daughter's in kindergarten, she's at max capacity. I know both 4th grade teachers are 26 and 27 students each. All that means is that we have less classes and not less students in each class. So when we have 2 2nd grade classes one year and 3 3rd grade classes the next year, it just causes mass chaos in the school. Our teachers are moving all over the place. We lost 3 amazing teachers last year because of that, because we had 2 kindergarten teachers that went, or 3 kindergarten teachers that went to 2. We had 2 2nd grade teachers that went to 3. They're all over the place, and it's really unstable. And so there is this perception that we're at 65%, and that's really glorious and stuff, but the reality is that it's just as unstable. So I'm asking for support for that. And with the consideration that you do, we also are the only elementary school, I believe, that's on a really busy road. We're right on Post Road. It's a really busy intersection. It's already complete chaos in the morning and in the afternoon. There's been a couple of accidents before school, one just recently with a school bus. So I would ask that some consideration be brought to, whether or not we start the conversation about having a light at that. Also, parking is a disaster. If we're going to be adding that many students to Hamilton, we should address the parking and the bus circulation. But overall, I just wanted to express Hamilton's support for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yep.
Allison Nacera, 17 Douglas Drive. I really wasn't planning to say anything, but I'm a teacher, not in this district, but I haven't heard any educators' point of views. There's always uncertainty in the world of education, and we always welcome new students into our schools, and sometimes there's chaos when there's more students or new students, and educators prepare themselves for that. And I do agree with Mr. Nicoletto. I think that option 2 is the best one. I think that changing things, even though it might be a little disruptive to families, children are very resilient, and they will surprise you. And that's how I see things, and that's what I see every day. And I teach in the city of Providence, and we see lots of accidents, and children probably doing things much worse than what's in front of the school at Hamilton, running under buses, and we don't even have a place for our parents to pick up. So I think that if it's just a light that needs to be put in or something, I'm sure that our school committee could make something like that work, and it would be fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Only get one shot, I'm afraid. Yeah.
My name is Richard Roth, 158 Glen Hill. A couple things, looking at the projected capacities of all the elementary schools in the district, I see something very alarming in the long term. We have a lot of kids right now that are in high-density schools, high-density learning environments. Everybody at Stony Lane knows that we have a lot of flexible open plan spaces, and even in the best day, my daughter Aaliyah in first grade, she has a hard time even trying to pay attention in a open plan, low partition space where students are easily distracted. Let alone you have kids in flexible spaces that are not usually classrooms. So it's a really hard working environment for those kids, and it's hard to pay attention and learn under any good circumstances, let alone 90+%. So my question to the board is, is there an investigation into the longer term, maybe adding a facility, an additional facility for elementary school in inland of the town or south? Because as previously noted, we do have a large bell curve for growth in this town. My family made a large investment to move to this particular town because of the quality of the schools here, and I see a bigger trend coming up. North Kingstown offers a huge value to come to this town, and I would assume there's going to be way more families kind of following that trend. And second, I'm a huge proponent of having a clause not only just for this redistricting, but in general for future redistricting, that any student that does elect to redistrict and not opt out and drive their kids to a school of their choice, that they are grandfathered or protected from future redistricting throughout their middle school tenure. Thank you, and appreciate your time and effort in our kids' education.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Natalie Hartley, 155 Elmwood Drive. My daughter is in kindergarten at Forest Park. I'm also a reading coach in Providence. So my daughter will definitely be moving because both proposals say that she is moving, and we're very happy at Forest Park. But one thing that I find, I had a nice conversation with Dr. Auger, a problem with all these proposals is the lack of diversity at some schools and the over-diversity at other schools. Not over-diversity, but I would like my daughter, I like this town, I like the way that it's diverse and there's a lot of different types of people, and I would like her to be learning with all kinds of kids. And at Stony, she will probably most likely be with white middle-class children as she is. So that's one thing that I think that neither of these proposals really look at, and so I think that that's something important. Another thing that I talked to him about was adding some sort of like magnet or lottery program, such as a dual language program, because that can, people can opt into schools such as Hamilton that doesn't have as much of a population. I know South Kingstown has a couple dual language programs. In Providence, we have a few, and we're doing very well. I invite anybody to come to my school and visit our dual language program. It's amazing. And the kids are really going to be ready for career, and so I think that it's really important for our kids to have that option of learning 2 languages, and so that's another thing. One other thing that we talked about was just having some sort of shadow day or orientation. She had orientation for kindergarten for Forest Park. Is she going to have that at Stony Lane? How are we going to transition these kids over to their new school so that it's nice and smooth and they feel comfortable switching schools? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Short people. Hi, my name is Carrie Vassatoro. I'm at 4 Southwick Circle. So my child is affected regardless of which option is chosen. Oh, I'm just going to take this off. But my concern is, along with the reducing the amount of kids that are affected, I think that's great with, that is being looked at. But I think transportation is a big issue in this piece as well. So I am requesting that at the very least, the lottery program be removed from the plans pieces per se until we see exactly how many children are going to go where after which piece is chosen. But I think in the district as a whole, transportation is a large issue that really needs to be looked at in more of a granular way. And I'm not sure if there were work sessions or anything that's been, had at this point looking at the transportation. But if we're going to have children who are going to be moved, need for buses is not just, it's across the board regardless of your income or situation or where you live. I just don't think that it should be given to folks as a lottery until we see how many kids will be affected. Because for mine, that's my situation. I've been blessed with someone who has offered to, pick my child up every day after school so that they can stay with their school, but not everybody has that option. So I think that's an important piece to look at as a whole. And I've said it before, and I said it when I spoke at the last meeting. Certain things should be included in our school process, and the fact that the late bus has been removed from the high school, to me, is an issue as well, because kids need to stay after school for extra help. They're getting ready to go to college. They're trying to prepare to go to college, and they can't get home, so they can't stay. And the answer that was given was, well, take RIPTA. Well, I live by the turf farm, so there's no RIPTA coming to me. So I just think transportation as a whole should be really looked at closer into this budget preparation for the upcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm one of the short people. I'm Jennifer McCann. I live at 62 Douglas Drive. My husband and I have a 4th and a 5th grader at Stony Lane. We love Stony Lane. I'm honored that I get to volunteer there and I even get to substitute teach a little bit. So I feel really strongly about our connection there. However, with that said, I do think in the long run, option 2 makes the most sense, given the fact that we may have to redistrict in the next couple years. I just don't want to do this again to our kids if we can help it. Also, with option 1 seemingly a given, the Shermantown neighborhoods are going to be going to Hamilton. It looks like some years there may only be 4 kids from Stony Lane who get sent to Wickford Middle from the Glen. I see the kids in 5th grade. That's a big concern. You know, when there's 12 or 20 kids going to Wickford Middle, that's a significant. You're going to know somebody there. But 4 kids, that makes me sad for those children. My daughter, she's excited either way. She doesn't really care. She goes to Hamilton. She'd love to stay at Stony. She's excited to meet new kids next year. So skin in the game, that's not an issue for us. But I would like you to consider, as I listen to other parents tonight, potentially not making a decision on the lottery bus yet. If you choose to go with option 2, maybe table the lottery bus until the numbers are firmer. It would give the families who are offering to be grandfathered in for grades 3 through 5 the option to have some transportation for their children. Potentially, it could give students in grades 3 through 5 who have siblings currently at Stony Lane to also be grandfathered in, alleviating some of those concerns parents have spoken about tonight. The other thing it would do with the lottery bus, looking at the numbers with adding an option 2, all of a sudden Hamilton is in the same boat potentially as Stony Lane, being at 92% capacity. That's alarming to me. It won't affect my kids. They won't be there. But in the long run, that you're going to be going through this all over again. And the other piece is, like Mrs. Vigil said, the pickup situation and the drop-off, but particularly the pickup at Stony Lane. If our students aren't grandfathered in and there isn't a bus, I'm imagining the chaos of trying to pick them up and all those parents waiting outside. I just don't see how that's going to work. So I ask you to perhaps wait on the lottery bus, see what the numbers look like, and thank you very, very much for your time and your dedication to our students.
Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Stephanie Reuter. I live at 49 Brigade Drive. I'm also in favor of option 1, but if option 2 is seriously going to be considered, I would expect that a plan would be in place to handle the teacher-student capacity. So prior to the vote, if you guys could propose a plan, if they're already at teacher-student capacity, what are they going to do when there's an influx of more kids? So that's all I wanted to say. So prior to a vote of support, we think that should be addressed. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, then we're going to move on with the agenda. Next item is, and thank you all for speaking.
Yes.
We're definitely, Dr. Jay is about to do a superintendent's report, and we'll take all of these comments into our consideration. So, Dr. Jay, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming to the microphone. I really do appreciate the level of engagement tonight, and a lot of great comments, a lot of respectful comments. It's much appreciated. So I do want to address a few kind of themes that I saw along the way. A lot of you talked about avoiding disrupting students more than once. I couldn't agree with you more. And I pledge to you that if there is, I don't believe we would need to do some redistricting for at least another few years, but you just never know. And a lot of people pointed to, we do have studies done for us to look at long-term demographics of our town, and they're telling us that overall the district seems to be looking like it would stay flat, whereas most districts in Rhode Island look like the children K through 12 age is actually going down, but we're looking at kind of staying flat. That doesn't necessarily mean it's always flat at one level as opposed to another. You could have years where, elementary spikes, but middle is starting to go down, and then the overall effect is still flat, right? So one way or another, you need to build in, capacity to absorb kids into neighborhoods as needed, and that's an important theme. The district has spoken about in public the desire to go to a new districting plan that would include one middle school for all of North Kingstown and do our elementaries a little bit differently with, say, 5 schools that may include Davisville Middle as a larger elementary school option. There are a number of different ideas about this, so nothing is concrete yet. We're going to be doing a lot more discussion of that in the upcoming months and probably years. And something of that magnitude would involve a major bond. So, there will be a number of public meetings on that, and there would be obviously a vote from the citizenry about that. If something like that does not happen, there would still be, then we would have to go back to the drawing board if that gets voted down, then to really put a lot of money into the long-term infrastructure of our schools, particularly at Wickford Middle School, built in the 1930s, really needs a lot of upgrading work. And all of our schools have projects that we see in the next 20 years. They're going to need to happen, And, you know, I think the overall total is something in the magnitude of $75 or $80 million if you add up all the projects around the district. And that's not including building a new middle school, which could be that kind of money all by itself. So, so there's a lot to talk about in terms of the long-term, you know, districting and how things look 10, 20 years out. If something like that were to happen, where you now present, you know, a whole new middle school option and you do something different with the elementaries, then you could really go to the drawing board and start to do some redistricting with that kind of 80% for everybody in mind, and really build in a cushion there where you know for, you know, 10 to 15 years out, you're probably not going to have to do any redistricting, no matter which neighborhood tends to, you know, get real busy at any particular point. What's busy right now, what looks like it's busy in your neighborhood this year, could be very different 2 years from now with people moving into other neighborhoods. For instance, this year, without our foresight, we saw a lot of people move into Forest Park and a lot of people moving into the Stony area. And like I said, they all had 5-year-olds, so they just filled up those kindergartens. We had to add a kindergarten at each school, a full kindergarten.
And a lot of twins for some reason.
Yeah, a lot of twins, yeah. Anyway, so, so that was item number one. The class size issue came up a few times. If we add to Hamilton, now Hamilton does have a number of classrooms that are about or near cap. Some of them aren't, but some of them are. Probably a little bit more so at Hamilton than other schools, but this is a common problem across the district. But if you just take 80 students that we would transfer under option 2, and you divide that by 6 grades, it's about 13 kids. So if I have 3 classrooms right now in grade 3 that are at cap, and I add 13 kids, that means now I have to have 4 classrooms, and they're not at cap. Now, that 13 into the 26 average, right, is going to bring everything down to a comfortable, say, 22, 21 on average. So introducing more kids into the cap of the school does not necessarily mean you're stuffing all the classrooms over the capacity with kids. I just want that to be clear. The math may come out that you actually gain space in every classroom there is. There'd just be more classrooms. Now, every one of those vacant rooms that's currently at Hamilton would have a class in it, and the way the kids would divide out might actually be less, and you would have fewer classes that are at cap, at least on percentage. So that's a point I think worth noting. The other point, and I mentioned this last time, but I know there are a lot of new people in the audience tonight. We have approached the town and the state about a light on Boston Neck Road near Hamilton. You are correct, particularly around, you know, dropping off time and pickup time. It can be a mess out there on Boston Neck Road, and I've talked about this with 2 town managers, including our current town manager, Mollis. He agrees that something should be done. It's actually a state decision because Boston Neck Road is a state road, so we have to work with them. They are not of the belief that a light is needed there, but we are still petitioning them for some kind of signage, you know, some kind of blinking red signs on the side of the road saying, you know, school's getting out, please slow down, something along those lines, just to let people know this is a school zone, we really need you to slow down, and that we think will help. So, you know, I just wanted to point out all of those things. There was one question about, you know, why would we go to number 2? You know, I tried to mention the pros and cons of each. The second option has the benefit of, you know, keeping that neighborhood together and going to Wickford, which a lot of people seem to like. But, you know, like I said earlier, each side has its pros and each side has its cons. I'm not in particularly vested in one or the other. I think it's a difficult decision for the school committee to make, given the range of opinions, and, you know, I would open it up to all of you and to talk about, you know, what your concerns are, and if you need anything more from me before we make this decision at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dr. O'Shea. Thank you, Dr. O'Shea. School committee members want to chime in?
I mean, I agree with what everybody's saying here, that if we are looking seriously at option 2, that we take out the lottery bus and we provide busing to all those neighborhoods. I would like to know, obviously, that yes, if that we could put some kind of clause in that if we move these kids once, we're not going to move them again. And also, what is the numbers if we do grandfather siblings? Like, could we come back with, for the few families that are affected with multiple kids?
Could you ask that question again? If we do grandfather who?
Like the potential for grandfathering siblings. So if you have a fifth grader,
Oh, okay.
like just families with siblings.
Okay.
But then after those 3 years, they would have to provide their own transportation.
Okay.
That would be the key, or drop them off at a bus.
I will
Yeah.
have that information for you at our next meeting.
So, but I think that we have to come back with proposal 2 for sure without a lottery bus until, number 1, we know the numbers, and number 2, we know that these neighborhoods can be transported.
Anyone else?
Is
Mr.
there,
Tony Jones.
Just quickly, is there anybody, folks could reach out to, maybe put a little bit of pressure on, including myself, regarding the intersection there and including possibly sprucing up the school zone signage that's there now, which is, fairly ratty and kind of overgrown. And you guys know sometimes I work overnights, and even coming through in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, I can't even tell you how many times that I've almost met my maker trying to go through that intersection. So certainly if there's somebody I can contact, and everybody here seems engaged, I'm sure they'd be willing to contact. Is it the town manager, or should we look for somebody to contact at the state level?
I know the town manager is working on it. I'll ask him that question, if there's someone, that he is petitioning to, if it would help if others petition as well. But I'll ask him that question.
And what I'd suggest...
But I know he's trying. I just want everyone to know that this isn't something the town manager is saying no to.
I've mentioned to some people who've met with me that these are the things no one wants to hear, but when you deal with layers of bureaucracy,
Yes.
there are layers of bureaucracy. Unfortunately, there's nothing this school committee can do other than make a lot of noise regarding a light at that intersection. Likewise, going to the town council and the town manager, there's nothing they can directly do other than make a lot of noise, because this is where you get that bureaucracy. Only the state of Rhode Island DOT can put a light there. They are looking at the whole state of Rhode Island. They're not looking at any particular intersection, and I'm sure when they look at that intersection, they go down there at, say 11 o'clock in the afternoon on a day in July, and everything looks peachy. They're not necessarily considering the peak school times. So what I'd suggest is anyone, who really wants to push for that, contact your state representatives. State senators would be, probably that neck of the woods would be Robert Craven, and it could be, so Senator would, I'm trying to think where the lines go.
Julie
Valverde,
Casimiro.
right? And that's the weird one, but your state representatives, all of them, because they can put pressure on the DOT as well, and those are the kinds of things that get that kind of work done. Mr.
I would, boy, if you call into WPRO when Director Alvidi's on, I know that got the left turn signal for West Allenton and Route 4 going, because got calls, I think, every week about that. Still hasn't fixed the beach thing, but that's a separate issue. I would just point out a couple things. We had the transition from the K3 to 4-5 to K5. Hamilton had 130 more kids than it has now. I think my son was in a third grade class that had 105 kids. And is it Mrs. Crothers that... But God bless all of them, because there was no assistant principals like there are now. And Stony Lane had 470-something kids, which is 60 more than they have now. So I think sort of the ebbs and flows of a school, and I believe, how you measure schools is somewhat subjective, but if you look at some of the objective measures, both schools have done fairly well when they had a lot of kids, and Hamilton when they have less kids, and I'm sure they'll do fine, because I don't think we're going to send them back to 450 kids anytime soon. So I would just say there's kind of that ebb and flow that happens. The other point, and I tend to agree on the lottery bus, but 6 years ago, I think it was 6 years ago, the committee then had to make a decision, had to make several decisions. They weren't easy in terms of, I think that was the year they were level funded, and had to make significant cuts, and the committees I've been on have had to make cuts. They're never easy to do. That committee had to make very significant cuts, and they had the ARA funding before then that had kind of allowed them to postpone making some of those cuts. And I'm not going to second guess, hindsight of how maybe town planners could have done things better 20 years ago, thinking about where to put stuff. But I think that committee then tried to make these little small cuts across the board in the same thinking, not to avoid a major cut. And one of those was just cutting 2 buses, which didn't seem a lot, but we're living now with the start times we have because we cut 2 buses, which we've not been able to dig out of, even though we want to. So I would just say be cautious sometimes of making small cuts because they sometimes have consequences that then cascade. I think I agree. What we really don't want to do is revisit this several times. And I do think we have an obligation to really think about the long term. Hopefully sooner than later we'll have a second revision of our long-term plan, which I think will solve a lot of these issues. I know that won't help you because that's a 5 to 6 year out, and of course the town has to approve all of it, and so that will take a little while. But I would just say whatever decision is made, I hope the committee thinks about solving, not making small cuts that have to keep being revisited and you live with the unintended consequences of those.
Anyone else want to chime in?
I think most of the things that I jotted down were covered by Dr. Auger, but one of the things that I know was brought up at the last meeting that was again brought up today is the students who are not districted for Stony Lane, who are currently attending Stony Lane. And I know we've talked about this in the past and the difference between those children that are out of North Kingstown completely, but there are children who reside in North Kingstown who are currently at Stony Lane. I'm just wondering if you could go over that again for the group.
I can talk about, thank you. Yeah, we went over it last time, but there's a lot of new people in the audience tonight. So, right now, we have policies in the district that allow students to transfer from one district to another in North Kingstown. The rules around that are if there's space in that grade level at that particular school that you want to go to, and we can make it work, we'll make it work. We do not provide transportation. And it's a 1-year only deal. So you're kind of taking a risk that in the next year, we're not going to kind of fill up at that grade level, and then your child would be sent back to their original school, or another option for a transfer if they wanted. So some people do take advantage of it. A number of people do. We get about 65 requests in the district this year, and we honored about 50 of them. Those numbers are not included in these numbers. I just want you to know that. And I think there's a perception that a lot of students want to go into whether it's Stony Lane or Hamilton, and that's really sending the numbers up. That is not the case. The highest group transferring into a school under this program are Fishing Cove and Forest Park right now, and I think third is Quidnesset. So it's actually lowest right now this year. I think it's only 4 kids that have transferred into Stony Lane, and part of that may just be there were some more requests, but at those grade levels there just wasn't room, and it could be for instance at Hamilton, if there's a class that's near cap, we're not going to do that. Even if it's close, we're going to avoid doing it. So that's a different thing altogether. There are students that may not be living in the district that happen to be in our schools. Those have a lot to do with DCYF cases, or cases where a family has been split and all of a sudden they're living with grandma in Warwick, but they've been at this school all along. There are laws around that. We work with state agencies about all that sort of thing, and those students are still allowed to continue in their school, at least for a certain amount of time, to avoid disruptiveness and all that. So, and every district deals with that issue. If you're talking about students who are maybe here illegally because their parents or grandparents may have given us a false address, that does happen. and we do prosecute when that happens. And it happens, you know, not a ton. There might be 10 or 12 cases in North Kingstown in every given year. Some of them work themselves out through the courts. Some of them, we let them know they need to stop doing that, and they just stop. You know, but all districts have that issue going on too. So we're not unique in that. But that's not, you know, the issue that's, you know, driving the you know, the capacity issue at any particular school right now. None of those things.
Thank you.
I just have two more quick points.
Sure.
I appreciate the parents who asked for the orientation or additional support for the children that will transition.
Yes.
So I think that would be a very important.
We would definitely make that work. Absolutely.
Okay. And then in regards to the traffic light and the situation on Boston Neck Road, I drive all the time on West Main Road in Portsmouth, and there is a elementary school right on that busy road, which is a much busier road than this particular one. And everybody goes 15 miles an hour on that road. Everybody who drives up and down that road knows that there is a school there, and they intentionally drive really slow. And I don't know how it started and why they do that, but people know. And if we can do something like that, it's probably a marketing campaign, and the town council can help us with that. In the absence of a traffic light, I think that is what we need to do.
Yeah.
The reason I lived in South Kingstown and went to Roger Williams for college and traveled down that road every day, and the reason is because there is about a 50% chance of a police officer right after that blinking light on any given day. So everybody always slows down, and sometimes that's what has to happen. But, just a couple things I wanted to touch on briefly. With respect to the guarantee, and this isn't to scare people or whatever, I will tell you, I will not, as long as I'm on this school committee, vote for any proposal that moves any of the kids who get moved now again. But there's nothing that we could do that would prevent a future school committee from undoing anything that we do. So there's no way that we can put that in there, but another school committee in 4 years that aren't us can vote and move you anyway. That's just the way the system works. So I don't want anyone to have a misunderstanding about that. I can just tell you that, you know, I think everyone at this table is dedicated to making sure that that doesn't happen. It's not to say that there might not have to be a change in the future. We just wouldn't move the same kids again. With respect to the lottery bus, I applaud Dr. Shea. I think it's a great idea. It's definitely thinking out of the box. I'm not sure it's the right time to do it. And I think that if we were to put that off or not do it now, it does give us a lot of flexibility in some of the other proposals with respect to transportation. That's my thought on that right now. So I think we need to look long and hard at that. With respect to transfers, I think also, you know, if we're going to be moving people around like this, I think we need to really slow down transfers in the schools that are affected by the redistricting, because as people have mentioned, it's not fair to somebody who just had their kid moved to then have somebody who, you know, that's not even their home district gets to, you know, come in. But just one point, you know, regardless of how this works, the transfer system would still otherwise remain the same. You know, so somebody who's affected by this redistricting, if there was a different school they wanted to try to send their child to, that's an option. You know, with the same rules that are in effect all the time, which is, you know, year-by-year space availability. And as Dr. O'Shea mentioned, the way that works is we've been talking about class caps. If a transfer student is the child that bumps a class, meaning like a grade above a cap, and would require us to hire a new teacher just for that one transfer, we're not able to accommodate that request. But if you have that particular grade level at that school they want to transfer into has lower numbers, and adding one child doesn't affect the, you know, number of kids in the classroom beyond that one or the number of teachers, then that's when it does work. The plan has always been, we were originally going to be voting on this proposal at this meeting. We wanted to give 2 full sort of meeting cycles before we made any votes because of the number of additional things we've asked everybody to look at. We said we wouldn't vote tonight. We're not going to, but we do expect that we'll make a vote at the next meeting, which is 2 weeks from today. Same place.
Yes.
We'll get this room, same bat place, same bat time. You know, you can expect that we'll have further discussion and make a final decision. So, you're welcome to reach out to us. I personally have met with a number of people. Most of us, I think, respond to as many emails as we possibly can, and if we're able to do so, we're happy to meet with people and hear your concerns, outside the public forum as well. So. And I can't, thank you enough for coming. The whole idea of democracy is to have this kind of discourse. There is no way that everyone who leaves this room when we're done is going to be happy. Unfortunately, we can never make everyone happy. I would love to. We need to, as I mentioned once before, look at, the big picture, what's best for the district as a whole. Sometimes that does affect, one particular group of people in a way that, they would rather not be affected. But sometimes we have to do things that, we don't always want to do, but have to do. And that's the position we're in now. Trust me, we would rather not be looking at this, either. It's not one of the fun parts of our job. But we have to do what we need to do. So we're going to move on to the remainder of our agenda this evening. So next item on the agenda would be if I could have a motion to seal the executive session minutes of March 12, 2019. I have a motion from... Yeah, you're missing the fun parts. A motion from Ms. Hoskins, a second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. I can disclose that there were no votes taken in the executive session this evening. On our consent agenda, I'm going to exempt item E8. And any other exemptions? Was everyone at the last meeting? I think, yes. Any other exemptions? All right, hearing none, I'd ask for a motion to approve the non-exempted consent agenda items. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, second Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. With E8, there was a typo on the agenda, so I just exempted that to correct it. So for item E8A, the effective date for Jean Russell should be 2/14/19, not 2/14/18. So just fixing a typo there. So I'd ask for a motion to approve item E8 with the correction to Jean Russell's effective date being February 14th, 2019. I have a motion from Mr. Tony Jones, second from Mr. Robert Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. That's the end of our consent agenda. Next item is item F, the school committee approval of a memorandum of understanding with the town regarding cash management. Mrs. King, I'll turn it over to you to give a little bit of an explanation about that.
So the memorandum of understanding in front of you is the culmination of Dr. Ajay.
I don't think your mic's on, sorry.
Dr. Ajay and I, there we go. The memorandum of understanding in front of you is the culmination of Dr. Ajay and I working with town manager Ralph Mollis for close to a year. We started talking about this in June, and there are a few items that I think are very important for you to understand about this memorandum of agreement. So, first of all, the town for many years had a system of what they called pooled cash. So we are, in effect, a $100 million plus town, and all cash items went through pretty much one account. I've been here for going on 7 years, and the town, whomever was responsible at the time, had always been the party that reconciled cash, that controlled cash, cash funding. Our cash payments went through them, and all of cash reconciling also went through the town side of the shop, if you will. That has resulted in the town for at least the last 7 years being unable to reconcile cash on a timely basis, causing the audits to be late for the last 7 years in a row. So starting July 1st, 2018, the town decided to de-pool their cash accounts and opened separate cash accounts, if you will, for school department activities and for town separate activities. And around that time frame had asked the school department personnel to assume responsibility for managing cash flow and for reconciling those accounts. Back in October, the school committee was good enough to grant me and Dr. Ajay the ability to hire on a strong assistant controller because this is a big change. It's certainly not brain surgery. We all know how to manage our cash, and we all know how to reconcile cash accounts, but it's not something that we have ever done in the school side before.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Just
Sure.
as an accountant, you use terms that not everyone's familiar with. So when you're talking reconcile cash, you're talking cash and checks.
Oh,
we don't have a
absolutely.
giant room with piles of money
No.
and somebody counting it like, you know,
That
the
would be
goblins
great.
and
That would
Gringotts
be
or something.
easier than this, actually.
So I just wanted to clarify, when you say cash,
Right.
you mean cash and checks
I
and,
mean,
and
it's
reconciling
just like
the
when
money.
you're looking at your account, except this is $70 million we're
Correct.
looking at here.
Thank you.
So every month when you all reconcile your cash account, all that online business, this is everything. This is making sure we have enough cash to pay our payroll, to pay our bills. This is reconciling to make sure everything that went through our accounts is appropriate, that there's no fraud. It's really a very big deal, and we take it very seriously. So luckily for me, I have a very strong controller, Steve Janelle, and we have a very strong assistant controller, Stephanie Rousseau, that we've hired on to assume this responsibility, which is a very big responsibility. I'm not going to pretend that I'm thrilled about it, because I'm not, but we were asked by Mr. Mollis to take care of this and to assist the town with this, and we're going to do it. So I'm going to call your attention to item number 3. That was a very big discussion, and that really is the funding of the town side of, as everybody knows, the town appropriation of property taxes is our biggest funding source. So we had bantered around quite a bit that it's important that the school department receive cash flow funding. So in other words, if the town appropriates $50 million to us plus whatever our state aid is, that's going to come to us pretty much in quarterly payments. Mr. Mollis had asked that in the first quarter because, of course, July and early August, we don't have the cash needs that the town does, and that's August. We know, you all know as taxpayers, that's when your first tax payments are due. So we can do that on an as-needed basis, but most of our cash flow, all of our cash flow is not really an even kind of thing. June presents a very big cash need. Early July, the only big cash need we have is for some health care funding, and then we don't really have big payroll payments again until September. So we've agreed to that we would do some as-needed cash flow funding up until August 15th, and then we would get the rest of the quarters as noted in the document. It's also agreed that if there is any cash flow issues, payroll is obviously our first priority, and that Dr. Auger and the town manager will work together on that. With this agreement, you are allowing Dr. Auger and I to open 3 new cash accounts. There'll be a general cash account, a payroll cash account, and a flexible spending account, cash account. Dr. Auger and I will be the only signatories on those accounts.
I got to stop you for 1 second there. And the flexible spending is with respect to flexible spending accounts for employees,
Right.
not flexible spending as in you get to spend it on what you want.
You know, yeah, exactly.
Actually,
Yeah,
I was
there's-
thinking
that
the
is-
other one.
He's right. He's right. I'm thinking you all know what I'm talking about.
I just want to, just certain words, I want to make sure everyone understands.
Thank you,
We're not
Mr.
going to
Blass.
answer
No
that question
problem.
for you tonight.
There's no flexible spending. And that's an important count, though, to have separately because there's some funding with, if any of you have your flexible spending accounts in your other jobs, you know you're allowed to build up a fund based on IRS regulations and use that funding for eyeglasses and other healthcare needs, and you know that's a use it or lose it kind of thing. So it is important to keep that account separate for us. There are a couple other items on there. I think the biggest item that I have the biggest concern about, and Mr. Mollis, who Dr. Auger and I have really enjoyed working with over these past couple of years, has communicated to us that the buck stops with him, and he knows me well enough to know that we're going to hold him to that. But my biggest concern is ensuring that through June 30th, 2019, the cash accounts that the town is reconciling are reconciled no later than August 31st. And it's very important because although we're going to be opening new cash accounts, that's the starting account on the general ledger. That account, whatever that ending balance is very important that we know what that ending balance is because That's what we're starting with. So I have the big concern about that because I know that the town has struggled with that. They continue to struggle with that even with separate accounts. And that is my biggest area of concern, and I will be in communication with Mr. Mollis continually about that, who has assured us that that's going to happen in a timely manner. And then the last item is the transfer of the school department fund balance, which is only a one-time item. Mr. Mollis has agreed that I will give him my reconciliation of what our fund balance is as of September 15th, and then any reconciling items that need to be made once the FY19 audit is done, which is supposed to be done by the end of this calendar year, we can fix anything that there were issues with. So, again, this is something that we have discussed with Mr. Mollis for many months. This is the final agreement that we came to. I think you know me well enough that I will certainly come back to you if there are any issues, and Mr. Mollis knows me well enough to know that I will come to him if there are any issues, and I trust that he is good for his word that we are working on this together, and hopefully it will be a good partnership.
Thank you. Can we start with a motion to approve item F? I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins. Second from Ms. Hildebrand. I'm just going to make, if I can start the discussion. As Mrs. King said, I can't stress enough, this is a big change, a really big change. The town has always handled, as is the case in most municipalities, all of the finances, because all the money flows through them. They came to the school department looking for, basically this type of arrangement so that the school department would be handling the school department funds separately and handling the reconciliations and everything that go along with it, which is a big change. Essentially, if you, some people do it, some people don't, balance your checkbook every month. You're talking about the equivalent of doing that with extremely large amounts of money, large ins and outs, and the school department is going to be handling its own part where that has never been the case before. And as Mrs. King mentioned, doing that triggers all kinds of secondary issues that we generally do not have to think about, which are that, generally this way the system works is when things need to get paid, the school department sends things over and they get paid. Now we need to make sure there's enough money in the account all the time. That money comes from the town needs to make sure they get it to us. The idea behind this agreement is to address, and it is just what it says in memorandum of understanding, so that everyone's on the same page. There are some potential pitfalls here. It will definitely be an issue if we're unable to start off with that, good starting balance. I do a lot of, in my job, in my own office, doing this kind of thing, so it makes sense to me, depending on how financially savvy individuals are. If you could imagine, you open up that brand new bank account and you're transferring money and closing out your old one, knowing how much money, exactly how much money and what is cleared and what is not out of the old account is extremely important. And that's going to be a very important part of this, as is the transfer of our fund balance, which is essentially the school savings account. This has always been all just mushed together over on the town side. Now we're going to have responsibility on the school side for everything. And so Mrs. King's worked very hard to put the procedures in place to make sure that it's responsibility that the school department's going to be able to take care of, and I'm confident that that's going to work out well. And but it is a big change.
And we will get back to you. We do have a few other policies to follow up on. There'll be a fund balance policy because we'll need to talk about, sweeping these accounts and whatnot. Right now, I recommend that we use the current bank that we have, which is Washington Trust. There are no fees, so that's really not, an issue. They've been a good partner to the town, so I think we should start there and then, decide if we're going to do an RFP maybe for different services. We can certainly talk about that. But we'll get, it is going to take a little bit, it's also not like we can go and open an account and boom, we get started. There's actually a lot of work that needs to be done within our munis accounting package with new account numbers. We need to get that all set up. So there is a little bit more to it than what we would know personally. But that's why we'll get started now, and then we'll stay tuned for more information and more direction from the school committee if there is anything else they'd like me to do.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
I just want to add, appreciate the
She's not on yet.
The superintendent and Mrs. King, and, you know, this MOU took a while to work through, and may not be perfect, but I do want to emphasize, because I think people, and rightly, if they're concerned about the budget and their taxes, you know, tend to look at staffing levels and ask questions when, especially management gets added, that the reason we approved a new position in the finance office was to handle this task. And as was pointed out, it is a significant task. So when budget time comes around, which I guess is now, but as budgets are being considered, I hope that the town remembers that the reason we increased our management size was because they asked us to take on this responsibility. So I hope they remember that some funding needs to come along with that.
And with that, it's approximately, you know, just under 2/3 of the you know, cash management that is shifted sides here. So it's a very substantial, you know, it's not a little thing. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we have the North Kingstown High School mathematics curriculum. If I could have a motion to approve. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'll try and wrap up. 9 o'clock, right? First I want to thank Dr. Auger and Dr. Humbert and everyone at the high school who worked on this. Curriculum is not easy. And thank you for answering some of the questions I had. My only comment going forward, and I know Dr. Humbert spoke this a little, and there's going to be some follow-up, the importance of integrating math across the disciplines. I know the standards here were written to align with Common Core and the pure math skills, but the whole notion of problem solving and those competencies, I think, lend themselves to interdisciplinary connections and some unique assessment opportunities too. So I know Dr. Auger and Dr. Humbert have said that there's a lot more detail behind this than just the curriculum, so I'm sort of look forward to hearing about some of those and appreciate all the work that goes into developing a curriculum.
Thank you. Any other comments? So we had a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, for unfinished business, anything on the 2018-19 school budget?
No.
2019-2020 school budget? Nope. That's on the town side of things. Next steps will be our budget meeting with the town.
Monday night.
Yeah, which is coming up. And then public hearings and on from there. CIP, existing bond, future bond?
Nope.
And then no new business. Under reports, we have the disposal notification and enrollment report, although I know the enrollment report didn't make it in the agenda, so if you could...
We will correct that for next time.
Okay.
I'm not sure what it was that got in there, but it was a mistake, so I apologize.
Little glitch,
Yeah.
we can get that. Any comments on the disposal notifications or the financial reports? I always point out in the financial reports, just in the interest of transparency, you'll see the ledgers for all of the checks that have gone out from the school department's main accounts listed alphabetically as well as numerically, so you can take a look at where the money goes on a monthly monthly basis. And if there's nothing else, we've reached the end of the agenda. I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. I have a motion and a second. Ms. Hoskins, then Ms. Hildebrand. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everybody.